Happy Columbus Day. I'm Michelle Aaron, a long-term friend and supporter of the campaigns, and on this occasion we'll be singing for you America the Beautiful. The accompaniment you'll hear, the recording, is a recording made for me this afternoon by my friend and the treasurer of the Daniel Burke for Senate campaign, Margaret Greenspan. A couple of notes about the song. The melody was composed by Samuel Ward of Newark, New Jersey. And in 1910, it was put together with the beautiful poem by Catherine Lee Bates of Massachusetts. I love this poem. I love the lyrics because they reflect two historical truths about our nation. One is the unique physical beauty of the nation. The other is the unique idea of the United States, the idea of the process of perfection of ourselves and our nation. In the third stanza, we ask that God mend thine every flaw and that we find some self-control. In the final stanza, we sing of the patriot's dream that sees beyond the years, a dream that sees beyond the present. That said, let's jump in. We'll be doing all four of the traditional verses. After the first verse, I'll put the words up on the screen because I hope that you will all sing along with me. Don't worry if you're not confident in your singing voice. The advantage of being in all of our own separate homes with the COVID Zoom meeting process is that it's very likely that nobody can hear you sing. So with that said, let's begin. Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountain majesties above the fruited plain. America, America, God shed his grace on thee, and crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea. Oh, beautiful for pilgrim feet whose stern impassioned stress a thoroughfare for freedom beat across the wilderness. America, America, God mend thine every flaw, confirm thy soul in self-control, thy liberty in law. Oh, beautiful for heroes proved in liberating strife, who more than self their country loved, and mercy more than life. America, America, may God thy gold refine, till all success be nobleness, and every gain divine. Oh, beautiful for patriot dream that sees beyond the years, thine alabaster cities gleam undimmed by human tears. America, America, God shed his grace on thee, and crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea.
Great. Thank you, Michelle, and Thank you, everybody, for being here. We are going to actually start this event in celebration of Christopher Columbus with a short recitation given by Bill Ferguson in Boston of the poem by the great poet of freedom, Friedrich Schiller, about Columbus. So we can go ahead with Bill.
Columbus, steuere, mutige Segler, es mag der Witz dich verhöhnen, und der Schiffer am Steuer senken die lässige Hand. Immer, immer nach West, dort muss die Küste sich zeigen, liegt sie doch deutlich und liegt schimmernd vor deinem Verstand. Traue dem leitenden Gott und folge dem schweigenden Weltmeer. Wer sie noch nicht, sie stieg jetzt aus den Fluten empor. Mit dem Genius steht die Natur in ewigem Bunde. Was der eine verspricht, leistet die andere gewiss. Steer, courageous sailor, although the wit may deride thee, and the skipper at the helm lower his indolent hand. Ever, ever to the west, there must the coast be appearing. Lies it yet clearly, and it lies shimmering before your mind's eye. Trust in the pilot God, and follow the silent ocean. Were it not yet, 'twould climb now from the torrents aloft. Genius stands with nature in an everlasting union. What is promised by one, surely the other fulfills.
Great, thank you. So as people may have guessed or know, I'm Diane Sare, and we are discussing the work and legacy of Christopher Columbus this evening, and also the battle that each of us is engaged in to save and restore our republic. I thought it was important to hold such an event because there is currently an evil effort by the British Empire and their fellow travelers to destroy civilization. As you know, these people believe the world can only sustain a population of about 1 billion people, and we now have close to 8 billion. So if you intend to murder that many people and get away with it, you have to alter people's opinion of the nature of man. Of course, this cancel culture operation is also tied up with the intention to wreck the presidency of Donald Trump and destroy our republic. President Trump is fighting this battle in the best way that he knows how to do and as best as he is able to do. I think all of us here, like myself, who were acquainted with the life and work of Lyndon LaRouche over decades, in some cases, we are feeling his absence. I think he was the greatest genius that the United States and perhaps the world has yet produced. And I say it that way because it's my firm belief and commitment that we have to create a culture which encourages genius, so that in the future we will have many people, thousands of people, millions of people who will make breakthroughs standing on the shoulders of LaRouche and his discoveries. At the moment, we don't have such a person with that quality of genius, and we find ourselves in the situation that President Trump, with all of his virtues and his flaws, is the best hope for the survival of the United States and civilization. Because Trump is not a part of this genocidal clique of billionaires, like those who spoke a few months back at Davos, Soros and Bill Gates and others, and because the transatlantic monetary system is about to completely disintegrate, there is an ongoing, desperate criminal effort to destroy President Trump, which began at least as early as 2015. In recent days, the existence of this seditious conspiracy and the involvement of people like Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, John Brennan, and others working for a foreign power, namely the British Empire, as expressed in the House of Lords and British intelligence services, is coming to light. And it is our job to make this undeniably obvious before the 2020 election period has reached its conclusion. That means actual indictments leading to prosecution and imprisonment of the perpetrators. That means defeating everything which Biden is unaware that he represents and securing the re-election of Donald Trump. But we also have to ensure that the policies of that second Trump administration are the policies that will allow the future survival of mankind. And that's where Christopher Columbus comes in. Europe in the 1300s and 1400s was a mess. One of Europe's greatest leaders, the young virgin Joan of Arc, was rewarded for liberating France by being burned alive at the stake at the age of 19. Think about that. You had the corrupt bankers of Venice who collapsed the economy, very much like what is being done in New York City today. The rat population exploded and unleashed the plague. 30% or more of the European population died. Everyone was crazy, and they joined crazy cults. They believed the earth was flat, even though Chinese and Egyptian astronomers had proven that the earth was a sphere centuries earlier. In 1431, Joan of Arc was killed. And starting around that same time up through the 1439 Council of Florence, Cardinal Nicholas of Cusa was leading a critical discussion in the church on the conception of the filioque, that the Holy Spirit emanates both from the Father and from the Son, that Christ is both fully human and fully God, which has major implications for the sanctity of the miracle of each human life and the infinite potential of each human being. One result of this deliberation was that a retrial of Joan of Arc was conducted, and in 1456 the church concluded that she had been an innocent martyr, and ultimately, actually another 500 years later, she was canonized officially as a saint. The act of clearing her name and reversing a great injustice was crucial to the Italian Renaissance and ultimately to the creation of the United States of America. Christopher Columbus, as you'll hear more from Liliana Gorini in Italy, was part of this process, a conspiracy to elevate mankind from bestiality and to try to discover a new world where a government reflective of human dignity might be established based on reason and justice. This is why the cancel culture movement wants to bury the legacy of Columbus, and it's also why the exoneration of Lyndon LaRouche, who unjustly served 5 years in prison, would be the most powerful intervention to secure the survival of humanity for generations to come. So next, we will go to the pre-recorded message from Liliana Gorini, who's the chairwoman of Movisol, the LaRouche movement in Italy. And rather than coming back to me each time, I'll just tell you she'll be followed by Kesha Rogers, the former Democratic Party nominee for U.S. Congress campaigning to impeach Obama and save NASA, who is going to talk about the modern-day Columbus mission to the stars with the Artemis project of President Trump and NASA. And then we'll hear from Daniel Burke, current U.S. Senate candidate against Cory Booker, on how Columbus came to be so slandered. And then there'll be a special message from Helga Zepp-LaRouche, and we will be open for questions and comments.
Columbus.
Hi, Diane. Hi, Kesha. Hi, ladies and gentlemen. I'm glad that you gave me the opportunity to speak about Christopher Columbus a few days before Columbus Day, because for us Italians, he is an important reference point, and we are very proud of the fact that he discovered America. And he is, as Diane will be saying, and also Kesha, he is the result of the Italian Renaissance, completely opposite to what people say, and they attack him as a murderer of natives. We, the Schiller Institute, Movisol in Italy, of whom I am the chairwoman, and Helga Zepp-LaRouche, in her presentation a few years ago, actually many years ago, in 1992, at a conference at the Vatican in Rome, on reviving the Christian and scientific roots of Columbus' heritage, she demonstrated that he was actually a product of the Renaissance, of the Christian roots, and she dismantled the Black legend, the fact that he was a murderer of natives, and proved the contrary, the fact that evangelizers increased through their action the population density in Mexico and other Latin American countries, something which was proven also by Alexander von Humboldt, who was a scientist who went to Iberoamerica and reported that through technological development, the evangelizers increased the population density. So when people say that he was destroying the native culture, they don't know what they're talking about, or on the contrary, they are speaking on behalf of the British Empire, which hated the Italian Renaissance, hates beauty, and hates Christopher Columbus, particularly because his grand project was a project of discovery of new worlds, new continents. Europe at that time was in the hands of the oligarchy, and thanks to these Renaissance men, to these circles of humanists, to which Columbus belonged, but also Toscanelli, the cartographer who gave him the map, which allowed this voyage to America, and others, they were having a grand project to discover new continents. And this was like the NASA of that time, actually. Christopher Columbus was very close to Toscanelli, as I said before, who was in Florence. He was a physician, an astronomer, a mathematician, and a cartographer. He was actually a friend of Filippo Brunelleschi, the architect of the Florence Dome, and gave him advices on how to build the Florence Dome, which was like the Manhattan Project of the Renaissance. It was a very important discovery in the field of architecture. And he was very close to other people, humanists in Florence, like Marsilio Ficino and Giorgio Antonio Vespucci, the uncle of Amerigo Vespucci, from which America, the name America comes, from Amerigo Vespucci. They were a circle in, and it was actually canon of the Florence Dome. So around the Florence Dome, which has become the symbol of the Renaissance to this day, and stands as a symbol of the beauty and discovery applied to architecture, to science, and to economy. Around this Florence Dome, you had the circles of humanists who were planning to discover new worlds. And the Toscanelli involved Christopher Columbus in this grand project, which made it possible to discover America. And as a matter of fact, he was not the only one who was involved in this project. There was a letter of Petrarca, the great poet, together with Dante, who created the Italian language, to the Doges of Venice and Genoa, where he said very clearly that they should stop these fraternal wars among Venice, Genoa, and other cities in Italy, and rather find a mission for Italy to discover the oceans. This letter was actually picked up in an opera of Giuseppe Verdi, Simon Boccanegra, which in the main aria of Simon Boccanegra, which I used once in a town hall meeting in New York City, is a beautiful aria. It picks up the main concept of Petrarca, saying, while the large reign of oceans ecstatic invites you, you fight each other, and I'm calling for peace, I'm calling for love. This idea that instead of having fraternal wars, one should discover new worlds is the same that the Schiller Institute has been pushing with the New Silk Road. And as a matter of fact, at that time, it was the Maritime Silk Road, which was very, very similar to it is actually the original Silk Road of Marco Polo, which was involved also in this project. There was a letter of 1433, which Toscanelli wrote to Father Martin on China and Marco Polo, saying that they should enlarge the Silk Road to the Far East. And that's what Christopher Columbus did. He discovered then America. And it is clear that for example, the campaign of Antifa and others, which is a campaign to deface Columbus, was inspired by the British. This is obvious that they always hated the Renaissance, because the Renaissance made it possible for people to go beyond the oligarchical rule, the slavery to which Europe was subjected at the time, and to become sovereign nations able to decide their destiny based on culture, on classical culture, and on technological development. This idea was opposed by the British, as today it is opposed by the Antifa and by the friends of Greta Thunberg, who are also vandalizing statues in Europe. So in a letter to President Trump in 2017, in which I asked President Trump to re-establish Columbus Day, I was remembering the fact that Columbus is a very important connection between Italy and the Renaissance and the United States. And this connection is very important to overcome the present crisis. And I was calling on the president to act, something which he did. He did re-establish then Columbus Day, because in the letter I was writing, what is going to be the next? Are they going to vandalize the statue of Leonardo da Vinci in front of La Scala, the famous opera in Milan, which is there to demonstrate that even classical singing, even bel canto, is based on the Italian Renaissance, because Leonardo wrote a treatise, De Voce, about the human singing voice, which was the basis for bel canto and for the opera. And that's why, I think this is the reason why the statue of Leonardo da Vinci is in front of La Scala. So I was asking the president, are they going to tear down also Leonardo da Vinci's statue in front of La Scala? Something which they didn't do, but unfortunately we observed in the last month's events in which they were vandalizing statues in Boston, in other cities. And for us Italians to see this is very sad, because it reminds us actually of ISIS, the way they were destroying monuments in Palmyra for exactly the same reason, because they hate beauty, they cannot stand beauty, and they hate the Renaissance. And once again, I believe the British, which destroyed Leonardo da Vinci's treatise on the voce, because they did not want that people can sing and can experience beauty, not only in listening to music, but also in singing. For the same reason, I think they inspired ISIS and others to destroy monuments, and the friends of Greta Thunberg who are destroying monuments in Europe. So it is very important to contrast this tendency to destroy our culture, our roots, and particularly the origin of the Renaissance, of the Columbus voyage, and to say openly, we have to defend this culture.
Okay, good evening. My name is Kesha Rogers, and I want to thank Diane for inviting me to join you tonight. And this is a very exciting occasion, a voyage for the future of mankind. So what I want to do today is I'm going to speak on humanity's extraterrestrial imperative. Christopher Columbus paved the way for humanity's voyage out into the solar system. And we're going to get into some highlights from the Artemis mission, which is the next mission of the United States to the moon, with the first woman and the next man by 2024. And I'll get into that shortly. But I want to start off by saying that, as Liliana so beautifully developed, Christopher Columbus's voyage was not merely a chance voyage. He did not just get in a boat and sail across the ocean without an intention and a plan. Christopher Columbus had a mission, and that mission was very clear. It was developed by Lyndon LaRouche at one point in terms of what was the intention of Christopher Columbus' voyage. And he said, and I quote, "to take the best contributions of European culture and take them across the great oceans of the world to other shores in order to create the kind of system of government which was needed." And it was Christopher Columbus who was following an inspiration of great discoverers and scientists who had come before him, as you heard Liliana developed in her remarks, of Toscanelli, of Christopher Columbus, of Nicholas of Cusa, and so many other great minds that provided the guiding light, those who discovered the earth was round, contrary to the insane ideas of a flat earth society. Christopher Columbus wouldn't have been able to make his voyage with the flat earth society. Those who designed star charts and navigation systems and guided Columbus on his voyage. The science that guided Columbus also later paved the way for the discoveries of new worlds in the solar system and beyond. And let me just show the first chart, which should be the first graph here, the sailing of the Columbus ships. Okay, we went from sailing the oceans to sailing the skies. And if you see here, what this is an image of is the 500-year anniversary, 1992, of Space Shuttle Endeavour, which is on the launch pad 39, that is on the 500th anniversary, 3 replicas of the ships that Christopher Columbus sailed, the Nina, Pina, and the Santa Maria, sailed by as the Space Shuttle Endeavour was getting ready to take off to the International Space Station. And you can go to the next slide there. This became the patch of the shuttle mission, which was our prior U.S. mission to get us to and fro the International Space Station. And finally, I'll just show you well, I'll come back to that in a second. So, as I said, that's the Endeavour. That's the shuttle Endeavour. We went from settling on new worlds on the Earth to building habitats in the sky, starting with the space station in low Earth orbit, from the Mir station to the Skylab to now the International Space Station, which many of you may know that we are celebrating 20 years of exploration and discovery on the International Space Station. And I wanted to just make a quick note of the remarks of the great space pioneer of the great space pioneer Kraft Erica. And Kraft Erica developed in a presentation he gave in 1975 entitled Space Stations, Tools of New Growth in an Open World. He says, quote, "Space stations are such a fundamental part of our future space capability that their use should be rooted in an equally fundamental objective. He goes on to say, and this is very important, quote, "I believe the true goal of man's space capability is not destination Moon or Mars or any other point in the space-time continuum of the universe. The goal is destination mankind, the realization of its noblest dreams and aspirations." So this brings me to what lies ahead of us with Mission Artemis, the U.S. return to the moon with the first woman and the next man by 2024, and what will continue to pave the way for this great exploration. That mission, as Kraft Erica said, is not a destination. It's not necessarily just getting to the moon, getting to Mars. It is advancing the cause of mankind. It is taking, as Christopher Columbus's voyage represented, the best intentions and the best contributions of humanity out into the solar system, as was the intention of what was accomplished through the voyage of Christopher Columbus. And so I want to read to you what has brought that mission forward with the signing of the Space Policy Directive 1 by President Trump, who this mission, in his signing of Space Policy Directive 1, called for return of human exploration to the moon as a foundation for future missions to Mars. And this is what the President of the United States, this is the type of vision, this is the idea of why we explore, that this is not just about politics. This is about what is the mission for humanity. And I'll just venture to say that as you think about this quote from President Trump when he was signing Space Policy Directive 1, and he said, and I quote, "After braving the vast unknown and discovering the new world, our forefathers did not merely sail home, and in some cases never to return. They stayed, they explored, they built, they guided, and through that pioneering spirit, they imagined all of the possibilities that few dared to dream." End quote. And that's the type of vision, the idea that the space program and what Mission Artemis represents is imagining all of the possibilities that people think may not be possible in the midst of the chaos and the crisis and the big bickering that is going on right now. But when we think about what we have the opportunity to bring about, we can see that Mission Artemis represents a vision for mankind. And so what I want to do just briefly here is I want to take a few moments to highlight those dreams and aspirations of Mission Artemis just by going through, and I would like to go through this more extensively, but due to time, I want to just kind of give you some highlights of what we're out to explore, to discover, what we will pioneer with the Artemis mission. And so let's go to the first slide here, which should be the lunar flashlight. So with Artemis, as I said, we want the ultimate goal is the development of sustained presence on the moon with the launching of the first man and first woman and next man by 2024. But we're not just gonna, there's an intention. We're not just going to put them in a spacecraft and launch them up there and just say, go there because we got to prove a point. We have to actually pave the way. And this, what you're looking at here is called the lunar flashlight. The first thing that's going to happen is in February of 2021, next year, there will be what's called CubeSats that are going to go to the moon and start to investigate the resources on the moon. This lunar flashlight will investigate using infrared laser, going deep into the surface of the moon, looking at where the water ice, which we have come to discover as a great resource on the moon, that's going to be instrumental for a sustained presence of the astronauts when they go, because the water ice will help with the oxygen, with water for drinking, for fuel. And so let's go to the next one, Viper. Okay, so the Viper rover here, which stands for Volatiles Investigating Polar Exploration Rover, Viper, is going to be launched by Astrobotics. This will be in the next year, and this is what's called the water hunting mobile robot. It's going to go and look for places where there's substantial ice water on the surface of the moon. So it will give a sense of where's the best locations for the astronauts to land. Right now, we're looking at the South Pole, Shackleton Crater, but where the South Pole is big, where is going to be a place that not only will they land, but they can develop base camp, which we'll get to a little bit in a few moments here. So go to the next one, please. Gateway. Sorry, I had those mixed up. Yes, thank you. Okay, so this is the Gateway outpost on the moon. Well, it's going to actually orbit around the moon. So the Gateway outpost is going to actually help to transport the astronauts onto the lunar surface, but it will be a staging ground, should we say, for getting the astronauts onto the lunar surface. And this is going to be where the lunar, where you will have the astronauts on some of the lunar surface that will go onto the surface. Excuse me there. So what the Gateway is going to have a propulsion system. It's going to get the astronauts, and also it's going to be a place where not only the U.S. will be able to dock, but where other international partners, where you will have the docking of other commercial institutions or commercial space flight. And so that's going to take off that's going to be launched in 2023. So right before the Artemis 3, which will carry the first woman and next man to the moon by 2024. Next, let me go to the next slide here. Okay, so the next slide is what this is a picture of is, it's a artist's conception of what it's going to take to actually build and develop the resources on the moon. When you're starting to build structures on the moon, first of all, we're not going to be able to take tractors up with us or big tools or something. When you're talking about building structures, you can't take heavy materials. So, you're going to actually have instruments that are going to be able to do 3D printing, to print up these structures on the moon, to start to build the habitats, or what we would call base camps on the moon, that we'll get to in just a second here. And some of the technologies and resources that we're coming to understand, such as 3D printing and the development of the different conceptions that are being laid out by a number of different companies, by universities, and there are quite a few advancements that are taking place right now. And some of the challenges are very exciting in terms of what young people are meeting in terms of crafting these types of missions and being able to come up with what is the most efficient way that we'll be able to build not just lunar settlements, but also to be able to sustain and permanent human presence on the moon. And finally, what I want to show you is, this is a artist's conception of Artemis Base Camp. And the Artemis Base Camp is what NASA calls, is going to be the foothold on the lunar frontier. This is where you're going to have the astronauts that land on the moon. First of all, when we go back to the moon, or go forward to the moon, as the NASA administrator likes to say, we are not going to be taking the same technologies that we had before, that only give you a certain distance to be able to travel on the moon, or that we would only be, on the surface for a few hours or so. We're talking about being able to stay on the surface of the moon for months at a time, to have missions that will go and stay 3 to 6 months. How do you do this with the radiation? How do you do this? What we're having to do is to build very specific instruments, or for our spacesuits as well, new spacesuits, that can allow for long-term stay on the surface of the moon. And we are going to be investigating. We also have shielding for radiation. So we're going to be actually building structures, and our spacesuits are designed for long-term shielding from radiation. And one of the things I found quite remarkable in the Artemis overview plan is, and I encourage people, if you want to get a fuller idea or view of what's going on, to go to the NASA website. And there's a 74-page Artemis overview with some beautiful conceptions. This one came, that picture came from there. But you're going to have, as was seen on that image, communication systems. We're talking about where you're going to have to, have systems of communications as people are traveling around the base camp, as they're exploring the surface of the moon. And one of the things you'll find in the overview is what's called LunaNet. And LunaNet is, as it sounds, somewhat like internet. So you'll have, I don't know if they're going to watch TV up there or something, but you're going to have basically communication systems, LunaNet, GPS systems on the moon. So that is what we're going to be pioneering in the Artemis mission. So I'm pretty excited about that. And I think I'm going to leave it at that because I'm sure we'll have some questions here shortly.
We can't hear Daniel.
I'm sorry, I was muted. Sorry about that. Okay, thank you very much, Kesha. Thank you, Diane, for inviting me to participate. My name's Daniel Burke, and I'm the LaRouche independent candidate on the ballot in New Jersey for the November 3rd election. I'm under the party name LaRouche Was Right. And so every house in New Jersey has a copy of that ballot, sometimes too many copies of it, or sometimes it got lost in the mail, but with my name on it next to Cory Booker's, and with that 3-word slogan, LaRouche Was Right. So I'm really grateful to be here with you tonight after hearing from Kesha on that tremendous overview of what the Artemis mission in fact means for our nation and for humanity, and from Liliana and Diane and others. I'm just going to be relatively brief in my remarks, simply to say that it's quite clear that we're up against an organized effort of pessimism, in which the days of rage that took place over the past 24 hours, as they called the Day of Rage, on Columbus Day, was part of a program to try to use an insurrection against the U.S. government to totally demoralize the actual friends of the Republic among our people. When I saw that Abraham Lincoln's statue was torn down in Portland, I went and I looked at the wonderful speech that he gave, very interesting speech he gave in 1838. And I believe he was only 28 years old. Lincoln gave this speech at the Young Man's Lyceum in Springfield, Illinois. And it was on the occasion of a case of mob violence in which a man was lynched. A black man was lynched in the area, and by an angry mob. And there had been incredible violence of this type across the country. And Lincoln is calling to mind the fact that the men who fought in the Revolution, the generation of people who gave everything to secure the U.S. territory and to secure the political edifice devoted to liberty and devoted to devoted to equal rights, he says, that those people and the passion that was represented by them has faded because, this was some 75 years later, or excuse me, 65 years later. And what is needed in order to actually pass on these gifts to the last generation that the earth will ever know, which is how he put it. In this speech, he reflects a certain optimism in the American people. He reflects a commitment to those principles. He happens to discuss primarily the question of the rule of law as opposed to mobocracy. But he communicates this deep and profound optimism about the potential of the American people to rise up to the level, through great hard work and challenge, the level expressed by the founders, and that this demands a love of reason. So I think that today this is what we urgently need. We need an optimism that is based on a faith in the love of reason being developed in the American people, being revived and being given body, which is what Kesha's talking about. That is the manifestation. All of those developments of mankind out in the moon and into the solar system and the galaxy, that is the manifestation of this creative power which distinguishes us from the animals. If there is not a successful defeat of the coup, which is presently attempting to bring down President Trump, and not merely President Trump, but the whole U.S. Republic, then under Obama-Biden 3, you're going to see the absolute destruction of anything like the space program, and a return to an acceleration into a no future catastrophic scenario. So we're not going to allow that to happen. And so I'm going to share with you what it is about Columbus that was hit, or in other words, how it is that the great optimism and spirit of Columbus, to which we've been paying homage today, how is it that this was targeted such that people, you go out and you talk to young people today, and Columbus is like a bad word. I had someone I've been talking to a lot say to me, a young man in college say to me, Columbus, you can't be telling me you're going to associate yourself with Columbus. Okay, well, why is that? Where does that come from? Where does this, pessimism about the great mission of mankind, how does that come to be introduced? Well, I think it has so much to do with the cover-up of the genuine history of Columbus, as expressed by Liliana and also by Kesha, in Cusa, who we've been talking about, who Diane was talking about as well. The idea that the mission to found the Republic, to found a new world, was one that was dreamed up by the great Renaissance thinkers. Well, why is it that people don't know that about the United States? If they're available, Dave, I'd like if you could start with the first slide there. This is just to give you an idea about where the conceptions that underlie our system of government come from. In 1433, to my knowledge, this is the first time that these conceptions were really applied to the idea of a system of government. Cardinal Nicholas of Cusa, the great German cardinal who went on to become second in command at the Vatican, he wrote a book called Concordantia Catholica, the Catholic Concordance, which has much to do with what Diane referenced about Joan of Arc, because it was in this period when he wrote this that there was a fight to get a revival of to get a proper address of the crime of her burning, and when he presented this at the Council of Basel, that was a major topic of discussion. Since natural law, he says, since natural law is based on reason, all law by nature is rooted in the reason of man. Since natural law is based on reason, all law by nature is rooted in the reason of man. And later, there is in the people a divine seed by virtue of their common equal birth and the equal natural rights of all men, so that all authority, which comes from God, as does man himself, is recognized as divine when it arises from the common consent of all the subjects. This is that divinely ordained marital state of spiritual union based on a lasting harmony, by which a commonwealth is guided in the fullness of peace toward eternal bliss. This conception is essential to what would later become the U.S. Republic, of an eternal bliss. As Lincoln says, that you're going to go on until the last generation that is ever going to exist on Earth, and you're going to, even then there will be Americans who have been maintaining and developing this republic to become immortal, as much as the human species has the potential to be immortal through our expansion into the solar system and the galaxy. Well, why is it that people don't know that this conception was really part of Columbus's mission? If you could go to the next couple of slides. Given that I don't, I just want to kind of give you a taste. This is Henry Vigneault. He was a school teacher in New Orleans, which I was too, and that's part of the reason why I got interested in him. And I actually lived near Vigneault Street, which I'm not sure if it refers directly to him, but he was well known there. He was a Confederate. He was a Confederate propagandist, newspaperman, who eventually became a Confederate spy. And if you could show, well, wait for a moment, and I'll get to the next slide. Dave, you can come back to me. So he was a Confederate spy who nearly got jailed, but got smuggled out at the last second by a Confederate spy master. I think it was Bullard, or Bullock rather. And no, Slidell. And he got shipped off to Paris, and he hung out there as a Confederate until eventually he became the leading secretary of the U.S. mission to France. Now, how did that happen? He was a traitor. Okay, but he became, at a certain point, he was the top guy there, continuing this treasonous commitment to preventing, shut down the interests of the Union, to block the progress of the United States of America, and to return it to this kind of the grip of war and chaos that had been, life under the Confederacy. So this Confederate traitor, by the time it gets to be 1900, he's starting to retire, or he retires maybe 10 years later. He becomes the leading world scholar on Columbus. And he goes on a world tour talking about how Columbus was actually never that great. What's the main piece of evidence that he has? The letter that was given from Toscanelli to Columbus that included the map, that included this conception. This letter, he said, never existed. You can show the last slide here, Dave. The letter and chart of Toscanelli, a critical study. He presents this in, I think, 1901 at a major Pan-American Studies conference in Paris. And it's about Toscanelli and Columbus. Well, what's his thesis? Basically, his thesis is that there was no such letter, and there was no such relationship. And Columbus just did everything accidentally and just sort of ended up there. And he was a fool, a bumbling fool. Not to mention he was a degenerate morally. So that's enough of this slide. And that's his thesis. And he goes around all across the world essentially communicating this, certainly in the United States, all over the United States, attacking Columbus, attacking his reputation, and claiming that this never existed. Now, guess what? The letter was communicated by a guy named Fernando Martin, who was the canon of Lisbon, Portuguese, and his thesis is this guy never existed. He was made up. But that guy signed the last will and testament of Nicholas of Cusa alongside Toscanelli. So that conception of the consent of the governed was communicated through this guy Fernando Martin to Columbus, essentially, by the work of Toscanelli, including the science of this great mission. And this guy says it never existed. He never existed. That's the fraud. That's the kind of fraud that this kind of thing is based on. And it just crumbles if you look at it and if you devote yourself to understanding the truth. But at the end, he got a huge pension from J.P. Morgan. A huge pension from J.P. Morgan for doing his job as a Confederate traitor to destroy the concept of Columbus. So that's what I want to share with people so you have a sense of where this attack on him comes from and why it is that you can't say his name anywhere. It's because of the Confederacy. It's because of the British. It's because of this international spy network trying to do cultural warfare on the American people and on the world. And we have to fight back. And that's what this is about. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Daniel. And we're going to move things along because I know you and several people on here have a call at 8:30 where there will be a reading for younger people of an extraordinary paper by Lyndon LaRouche called The Principle of Power. I just want to say one thing on the mobilization and then show a short video from Helga on this question of truth and stopping slanders. On the LaRouchePAC meeting of Saturday, the former NSA, now whistleblower Kirk Wiebe, urged people to call the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division, Senator Lindsey Graham's office, and I would add the Senate Judiciary Committee office, to demand that the full Durham and Barr investigation of the criminal activity leading into Russiagate be released. It's only fair if Americans are going to be voting in this election that they are fully informed that if one of the candidates, namely Joe Biden, has been complicit in criminal activity, that the voters have access to that information. So the 3 phone numbers are actually in the chat. They're also on LaRouchePAC, and I'm going to say them quickly, and you can write them down if you have a pen handy. The Department of Justice call-in line is 202-353-1555. Senator Lindsey Graham's office is 202-224-5972. That's a recording. It says, if you are a constituent, and I left a message saying, by virtue of being an American citizen, I am one of your constituents, even though I live in New York. And the third is the Judiciary Committee, 202-224-5225. We did get a report back from someone that apparently one of these lines has already been shut down. So I think that's a very good sign that we're doing our work. And now I just want to turn to a brief message from Mrs. LaRouche, and we'll open it up for questions and discussion.
Well, you asked me earlier what Schiller would do in a situation like this. Now, Schiller was not a politician, as you know, but a writer of dramas. But all his dramas were great strategic studies, which he wrote actually for every country of Europe, Spain, France, England, Germany, Poland, Switzerland. And you read all of these great dramas, and there is always one point in it which is he called the punctum saliens. That is when the entire history has reached a certain point of decision. And, in that moment, it depends on if the person who is, the main actor or the main figure in the play, can he mobilize within himself or within herself the kind of greatness, the noble character, the quality of the sublime to do the thing which is in the common good, in the interest of the future generations. And if you look at the United States, as a drama, the history of the United States, from the starting in the Renaissance, when the idea of a sovereign republic was developed by Nicholas of Cuse for the first time, and these ideas actually got realized for the first time in the American Revolution, in the American Constitution. Then naturally Columbus discovered America. A lot of things went into that. And then finally, the American Revolution itself, which was a European project, many forces went into it. Then you had the whole, actual war of independence. You had the Declaration of Independence. You had the development of the American system through Alexander Hamilton. Then the Lincoln, the Civil War. Then the unfortunate developments in the First World War, Franklin D. Roosevelt bringing the United States out of the Depression, then the entire post-war period, Kennedy, the moon program, the whole life work of Lyndon LaRouche as being the most important intellectual influence of his time, not only in the United States, but way beyond. And now you come to this moment where you have your punctum saliens of American history. It is the moment where all the beautiful things which America represented and contributed in the better parts of his history to universal history. And now you have the effort by the British Empire to make a coup, to undo all of that, to finalize the subjugation of the American colony under the rule of the British Empire. And it is up to you now. You are the player on the stage of history because the American people are the sovereign. But you have to assert that power right now. And that means you have to evoke inside yourself that quality of love, of agape, of really taking care not only of the United States, but of the entire world, because the fate of the world will depend on the outcome of this election. So I think you have to really mobilize inside yourself a power which is greater than anything you experienced in your life so far, because there is more at stake than at any moment before. So I count on you that you will do it, and together we will make the biggest mobilization in the next 2 weeks. And I think the enemy can be defeated, because one lesson from Schiller was also that you can bring down the arm of the tyrant if many people work together for a good plan. And that's what we have.
Great. Oh, I see we have our first questioner here.
Yes.
Jose.
Hello. Hi, can I be heard?
Yep.
Okay, great. That caught me off guard a bit. I wasn't expecting to see myself so soon. Hi. First of all, I want to say, Daniel, based off what you presented, it seems to be that whoever kind of slanders Columbus supports the Confederacy and the dismantling of the United States. So really, and maybe some people are for that. Maybe some people would be okay with that. But in any case, I just want to make the point that when people slander Columbus, they really don't know what he did. They just say that he was some idiot who kind of set his compass west and just left, but that's actually not true at all. In fact, when he got to the mid-Atlantic ridge, a lot of his crew members started getting nervous because their compasses were spinning like crazy. And there was a lot of superstition from the Portuguese. I'm not trying to say the Portuguese are any lesser than the Italians, but I'm just saying that, the Portuguese really thought that they were going over the edge of the earth. But Columbus knew that the stars were fixed, or at least that they weren't going anywhere. And he used his astrolabe and his quadrant to kind of figure out where he was and where he was going. So I just want to make the point that Columbus was actually the Neil Armstrong of his time, and to not recognize that is to be ignorant, not of just your history, but of what a scientific principle and what scientific discovery is. It wasn't that he found a new land and there weren't anybody there. It was that he found a method of coming back and forth consistently without going west and being left with no wind and people dying. So it just makes me kind of actually excited for the future, because what kind of principles of discovery will we find? I mean, will we be able to go to the moon back and forth easily? Will people, it's a dream of mine that one day I'll work on the moon and I'll be annoyed at the fact that the shuttle's 5 minutes late. Like the way I complain about the New York City subways, the way I'll complain about the NASA space shuttle. I mean, I know it's a great necessity, but geez, I got to run on schedule. I got to get to work at a certain time. So yeah, that's my comment and kind of question to anyone if they want to respond and take that up.
Great. Well, Kesha, do you want to have anything on that first?
I think it's absolutely right that, first of all, as said, when I said at the beginning, when I was giving my remarks, that it just irks me when you have this conception of Columbus. And, it's also like the education system, when they take snippets and contort it and twist it around. And so all you did in elementary and middle school and so forth is you had to remember these factoids about, Christopher Columbus sailing the ocean blue in 1492. And and so, but what is that? What was he really embodying? And who was Christopher Columbus? And then, as you go on in life, you are taught that, what, as said, you're Black, what are you talking about Christopher Columbus for? He just came over and took the land from the Indians, and he, had slaves and all kinds of nonsense that, people are, it goes back to what was stated a number of times in this course of this discussion, that it's the British imperial policy to take from people anything that represents a vision for optimism, for discovery, for the creative potential of mankind. And I thought that in Mr. LaRouche's remarks, when he talks about how the United States, how a republic came to be formed on the question of Christopher Columbus, that this idea was really reminiscent of the pioneering spirit, the idea of bringing, as I said, the best contributions and traditions of mankind. And that's what we're doing when we go to the moon. And I mean, that becomes part of the discussion too. Or when we go to the moon, are you going to have, countries fighting each other over resources, and, somebody get there first and say, well, now this country is trying to loot the moon and steal the resources like Christopher Columbus did or something. So I mean, I think it's very important what you're saying. The question that's said is a question of intention. What is the purpose of mankind? So I'll just leave it at that for now.
Good. Daniel, I know you have to get going very shortly, so do you have thoughts on what Jose said or anything else?
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, I totally agree that it's clear that people who want to attack Columbus are pro-Confederacy. And that's clear because, they tore down Abraham Lincoln's statue. So like, what other evidence do you want that these people are part of the Confederacy? And they want to do exactly what the Confederates did, which was rewrite the Constitution to exclude the possibility of progress. Because of course the Confederate Constitution includes in it that it's forbidden to make public investments of infrastructure, and that free trade is the law of the land, in addition to, of course, the enshrinement of chattel slavery. So that's that's the policy of the British Empire. That, of course, the Confederacy is the empire. The Confederacy was organized by the empire for the empire to destroy human progress as such by destroying the potential of the Union, by breaking apart the Union. And thank goodness, because of the people who came before us, who called themselves, defenders of the U.S. Constitution, who fought for the intention of the U.S. Constitution, that is not the case. We're still here. So I want to just share one thing, which is that I'd like to read from the proclamation that Trump put out for Columbus Day, and get people to consider what this demands of us. He says it's quite good. But he refers to his the creation of the 1776 Commission, which he did in September, at the same time that he signed an executive order to make critical race theory disallowed in the federal workplace and also federal contractors. And he says this is the same revisionist history that is trying to erase Christopher Columbus from our national heritage. And then he says, quote, "On this Columbus Day, we embrace the same optimism that led Christopher Columbus to discover the New World. We inherit that optimism, along with the legacy of American heroes who blazed the trails, settled the continent, tamed the wilderness, and built the single greatest nation the world has ever seen." The thing that I think is important about this is the concept of optimism, because if we can induce that in people by observing that the way you understand the nature of the human race is not by looking at all of the terrible things that have been done. Nicholas of Cusa, of course, famously responded to the burning of Constantinople, the sacking of Constantinople, but which was by the Ottomans, which was reportedly an absolutely disastrous, murderous affair. Of course, it was just blood, running through the streets. And he responded to that not by saying, this is the end, there's no possibility of resolving this kind of conflict between civilizations, but rather by writing De Pace Fidei, on the Peace of Faith, which is a dialogue amongst many, many different representatives of different religions about the higher principle among all religions, the coincidence of opposites. So we have to respond to the breakdown that we're looking at across in our nation and across the world in the process of this pandemic with this kind of optimism, an understanding that this is the best of all possible universes and that we can call upon powers to resolve this crisis at a higher level.
Great, thanks. So I'll just ask if there's anyone who's listening or watching who has a question or comment. You can think about it. If not, it'll be good because there are people on here I see who should definitely be in that 8:30 p.m. Reading. But
Diane, does everyone know how to
get on that? If you don't know how and you are 35 years old or younger, then put a note in the chat section and we'll get you the information. Put a note in the chat. I would just like to very much thank Daniel for joining me and thank Kesha for joining me. And in response to what Jose was saying, and also in general, I think one of the horrible things that's happened as a result of this cultural decline and the cultural paradigm shift in the United States, which occurred in the 60s, where the last 3 Apollo missions were cut basically by 1967, and the last flight to the moon was 72 until what we are about to do now under President Trump, is that people have gotten very ground down and they've lost their imagination. And I can't remember the exact quote from Albert Einstein, but he talks about the importance of the imagination so that people tend to think very small. Jose brought up the situation with the New York City subways. it's absurd that the tunnels between New Jersey and New York are 111 years old, and it was known when they were built that that kind of steel has a life expectancy of a century. Are people so dumb that they could not have possibly planned to do something about it or address it? But somehow it's taken for granted. Or you think about what people are asking for or what they're expecting in terms of this so-called next stimulus. Can't I just get a check for $1,200? Well, what we should be demanding is that our entire cultural economy is completely transformed, that we could take the disaster of the pandemic as an opportunity to say, we don't want to go back to where we were. We want to establish an entirely new platform where we reconfigure our workforce. We probably do not need 37,000 tattooers and massage parlors. Maybe I'm offending some people. We can keep a few of them, but we should actually have roads that don't have thousands of potholes. Africa is going to have 2 high-speed rail lines. One already exists in Morocco. Egypt is building one with China from the Red Sea through Cairo to the Mediterranean. The United States does not have 1 millimeter of high-speed rail. This is insane. And therefore, this conception of a new world, and I think that's part of what's so urgently important about the space program, which we will lose if Biden, I hate to even say it, if President Trump is not reelected, I'll put it that way, is that it inspires people to actually contemplate the future. That what is natural for human development is that our children and grandchildren, the next generations, should expect to have a higher standard of living than we do. And not only have a higher standard of living, but to be better people, to have more leisure time, to not be broken by physical labor, to be able to work on crucial scientific experiments, to become virtuoso violin players and great composers. This is what every human being on the planet has a right to. And as Helga was saying, it's in these very few short weeks that this may or may not be determined. People know us, this organization, LaRouche, we will never give up. We will never stop fighting. But we have an opportunity right now, which is a window which we have to act. So I would just urge everyone, take those phone numbers, they're in the chat, and call them tomorrow about getting these documents released, the Durham investigation, and organize with us. If you're in New Jersey, work with Daniel on the campaign, but help us to break this and to talk to your friends and neighbors about thinking differently. Think big. Don't ask for what is small, because if you demand what is great, then you have a much better chance of getting there. If you don't ask for it, then you're not going to get it. So that's what I would like to say. And again, Kesha, I guess and Daniel's still here. So I'd like to thank everybody for joining us. And we will see you again soon. And some of you will be seen on the next call at 8:30. And everyone should know that this Saturday, Roger Stone will be on LaRouchePAC.com at 2 o'clock to further this mobilization. And that there will be a conference call this Thursday night and perhaps a press conference during the week. So keep tuned to LaRouchePAC.com for the mobilization to defeat this coup and crush the British Empire once and for all. Thank you.
Thank you.